Oh, massive spot. Oh. Good evening, everybody. It's Katie from the Safeguarding Association. Just checking settings before we begin. If you can hear me, can you just give me a thumbs up or a hello in the chat box? I'd be very, very grateful. Thank you very much. Just checking you can hear me. Okay. Oh, screen's gone a bit wobbly. Not entirely sure what that is all about. Great. Thank you, Nicole. I really, really appreciate that. I'm never terribly sure. I've got awful light right above my head as well, and I'm not entirely sure what's going on. Okay. Can you tell I've been talking all day already, folks? I seem to be on a bit of a roll with all of this. So welcome everybody to tonight's safeguarding briefing. I do this every 6 to 8 weeks to catch people up in terms of what's happening and what's going on. And there's quite a lot happening in the world of safeguarding. So I will do my best in the next sort of 20-ish minutes to power through what is going on as I see it. And if you've got a question about tonight's safeguarding briefing, if you're here live, then you can use the chat function in order to ask me a question, or there is an ability to use the Q&A. The best way is probably in the chat box because I can see that really easily while I am talking to you, and I will do my best to answer them live for you this evening. Let us start with let's start with something that's ridiculously topical and is dominating press headlines internationally. And whilst there isn't anything of a safeguarding nature coming out of the current discussions that are happening within Parliament, what we are seeing as a knock-on effect of what is happening within Parliament at the moment are a couple of things. And yes, I'm going to say the dreaded B word, that is Brexit, because what we are seeing is a huge awareness of the current political climate. And by that I mean there is an increase in the number of issues arising out of the current political climate. The first is around radicalisation and prevent. As many of you may know, I work down on the East Coast in Kent quite a lot, and I'm aware that they are seeing huge concerns around far-right extremism. For those of you who maybe watch Countryfile like me, maybe you saw the report a couple of weeks ago about the issues around about the issues around the far-right rise within the countryside and how they're using the current situation to drive membership, and also using the countryside in terms of the sheer Britishness of it around things like stone circles, trees, cows, fields, as a propaganda machine, basically as a backdrop for their propaganda machine. Not that the countryside is a propaganda machine, but the backdrop for a propaganda machine. It's a huge, huge issue that's arising within the countryside. So I'm also seeing it happen amongst what's happening around Brexit as well, in terms of issues around port cities and places like that. Where we stand today, so today is Wednesday, the 23rd of October. Currently, the UK is to leave the EU on the 31st of October, so in a week's time. we're due to leave. At the moment, we have no clear plan on what is actually going to happen, a very, very messed up agenda in Parliament. And all that is doing, and the rhetoric that is coming out of the Brexit party, out of the Tory party, out of other factions, is geared up and is really quite inflammatory in tone. My concern is that, given we're already seeing a rise in far-right extremism, is this just going to add fuel to the fire as we move, depending on what happens as the outcome of next week, and depending upon what happens within Parliament? Added to that, I'm aware that there are huge tensions within Northern Ireland, and certainly within the island of Ireland as well. I, as yet, don't know what the upshot of all of this is going to be in terms of tensions that are over there, but I do know that there are serious concerns about the impact this is all having in relation to political tensions over there, and is there going to be a rise in extremism happening across there? Okay, that's it in relation to Brexit. No more on that issue. Let's dive into some things that are directly related to safeguarding and child protection. What are we seeing a rise in? Well, recently we've seen a rise in sexual assaults in universities over the last 3 years. That was a BBC report that came out a few weeks ago. If you're working within higher education, this is something that I'm fairly certain you'll be seeing. I was working with a higher education institution today. They are seeing that occur. It links in with the PHSE agenda that's going on at the moment around understanding healthy relationships. The aim is to try and reduce the number of assaults that are happening, and to address the issues around consent as well. None of this is particularly helped by the outcome of the recent court case in relation to Paul Gascoigne, where he admitted forcibly kissing somebody on the lips on a train. He's been acquitted of offences in relation to that, I understand. Whether there is yet to be an appeal or not, I don't know. I've not looked at it any further, but be aware of that. And there are certainly potentially mixed messages coming out from the court system, as well as opposed to those that are going into schools as well. So be aware of that. Also, there has been an increase in online grooming by a third, was another recent report that's come out. We know that the key hours of grooming are between 9:30 and 2:30 in the morning. That is something, for lots of you, you're on half term now. I don't know how many issues are going to be arising once you get back to your desks or back to your classrooms on Monday morning in relation to grooming issues that may well have arisen over half term, or may well have been a continuation of things that have been going on over the summer holidays and have now arisen again over the half term holidays. I'm not going to talk in depth about this next issue. I think it's something I have fairly strong personal views over. But I do think it's important that at this moment in time, in terms of grooming, we touch on the issues that are arising out of current press and certain areas of the media around the teenage political climate activist Greta Thunberg. There has been an awful lot around whether or not she's been groomed into her way of thinking, whether there's a level of radicalization going on there in relation to her. All I really want to do is a bit of a compare and contrast in relation to Jemima Beckham, who is currently stateless, although there's a dispute as to whether she's stateless or not. She is you may remember her as one of the 3 teenage girls back in, I think, 2015, who left the country to go to Syria. And at the time, there were discussions around whether or not she'd been groomed and radicalised in relation to ISIS and thinking that was going on there. Jemima contacted British government, or certainly persons within the government, earlier this year, wanting to come home. She had lost 3 children. She was married while she to the person who potentially groomed her, and she had 3 children, all of whom have now died. She is in a camp. The government earlier this year declared that they were revoking her British citizenship, and stated that she could claim Bangladeshi citizenship. There is currently a long hearing going on in the special immigration courts in London around her status and her fear for her life. It's very, very politically charged, that issue. And I'm raising it simply as an awareness mechanism that back in 2015, we said this young lady had been groomed and radicalised. We roll on 4 years. This young girl was married, potentially to someone who groomed her, had 3 children, and has suffered the trauma of their deaths and is now asking to come home. Whatever you think of the situation, almost is irrelevant. There are bigger issues that need to go on. If you're working with young people who are being groomed and radicalised, I think I'm really highlighting it to almost call out the double standard that seems to be going on at the moment. And I really struggle with how you can say someone like Greta Thunberg is being groomed to and put out a political agenda, and yet can't or refuse to look at the same issue for a woman who's now only 20, who is in a foreign country, who we accepted at the time was groomed and was radicalised. And we are now, because it's a political hot potato, putting her in a really difficult situation. I get that it's a really hot political potato at the moment. It's something that I think we need to be aware of, that there is a level of double standard going on in relation to these, depending on whether or not, seemingly, whether or not there is a will for her to come back, or whether there is a will around the issues that the young person was raising at the time. So I do not have the answers. I do not propose to have the answers. I'm merely highlighting it as a potential level of double standard that's going on, and something that we as professionals in child protection need to be utterly aware of, that there is a potential level of double standard going on. And we need to factor that into the safeguarding that we do and the child protection work that we do as well. Enough on that. There are a couple of cases that have come about in the last few weeks as well that I want to highlight as part of this briefing. Again, if you've got a question or a comment, please put them in the chat box and I will do my best to answer them as we go along. Last week in the Local Government Association newsletter, I noticed there was a case down in Dorset that related to a 15-year-old who was not only in secure accommodation, but there were issues around her liberty and whether or not there was going to be there were numbers of deprivation of liberty orders that were made. It caught my attention because the judge wasn't criticising the local authority, which in this current climate is really rather unusual. But actually what he was saying was the social workers involved in the case were doing absolutely everything that they could for this young lady. But he was highlighting the fact that this teenager really had nowhere suitable to go. There were not the properly equipped services, there wasn't the equipped accommodation, and they were struggling in terms of appropriately trained staff to manage her and ultimately to help her and provide a safe space for her. And it was really just highlighting, I think, what is a national issue that I see this up and down the country when I'm delivering reducing parental conflict training. And the issue really is that the services that we have had previously, that we have maybe potentially taken for granted historically have pretty much disappeared over the last 10 to 15 years. I'm talking things like Sure Start centres, like really good residential children's units where there may have been 3 or 4 of them readily available to any one local authority in their area. I'm talking about children's centres that had a range of support and fully staffed with really well equipped and trained and experienced staff. Long gone are those days where this was available. And I fear that we are, with additional austerity measures, we are ruining consequences of losing really good and experienced staff. So the knock-on effect is that those who are already pushed and already struggling with the amount of work they have to do are being asked to do even more. More is being potentially put on schools. More is being put on early help and multi-agency safeguarding hubs, if they even have the ability or the services available to do them. We know that children and adult mental health services are stretched almost to the point of breaking. We know that the court system is really stretched to the point where it's really slow churn. It was nice to see that there was a judge recognising the valiant efforts of social workers, because so often it goes the other way. But equally, I was quite, in equal measure, thrilled that a judge was able to call out the lack of resources that were available, but saddened that all of these services that we once had that were, in the most part, manned by really well and really well equipped and really experienced teams have all but disappeared. And the people that are suffering aren't necessarily the workers, it's the young people that don't have anywhere and any of those services to tap into anymore. On top of that, there's been a case in relation to parental responsibility. So if you ever deal with situations where there is a deprivation of liberty issue arising, there had been a minor school of thought that parents could give their consent via their parental responsibility to deprive someone of their liberty. This case has said absolutely categorically, you cannot use parental responsibility to remove a fundamental human right, which was that of someone's liberty, whether or not they are a young person. So we were particularly talking in this case around agreeing that someone could go into a residential unit or residential home and have their liberty deprived, and it could be sanctioned by way of parents' consent and not have any oversight from the court. And the court have basically said, no, that doesn't fly. You need to get court sanction for that. Fine. Well, last couple of points. I'm seeing an increase in county lines cases. There have been some recent cases reported in the press about really serious county lines cases. Keep an eye on that. That isn't going anywhere anytime soon. And the other thing that I am seeing up and down the country in relation to the new Ofsted framework is there is a massive focus on safeguarding. And if your local authority has any requires improvement or any comments around safeguarding issues, that is being looked at as part of the Ofsted inspection that's going on as well. So be aware, up and down the country, there seems to be a real focus from Ofsted on safeguarding practices, safeguarding responsibilities, who's got appropriate safeguarding training as well, and when was it renewed, and what is the plan, all going on. So be aware of that also. That, in a very quick roundup, are some of the key areas that I'm seeing in terms of child protection. If you've got any questions, I'm going to hang fire for 30 seconds to allow you to put them in the chat box, and I will endeavour to answer them as we come to the conclusion of tonight's briefing. So if anybody's got any questions, please pop them in the chat box now, and I will endeavour to answer them. feel I may have stunned you all into silence. Nobody got any questions? I'll give you another little bit of time in case I see anything come through. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. And I thank you very much for taking part in tonight's safeguarding briefing. And I look forward to seeing you on another one in the near future. If you've any, if you want any more information about the Safeguarding Association, then head over to safeguardingassociation.com, where you will find out what we can offer, how I can support you, and other ways to keep up to date in relation to safeguarding issues. Until the next briefing or until my next email, I will see you later. Thank you very much for watching. This is Kate from the Safeguarding Association, and I will see you soon.